Joel Veldkamp, a lot to discuss on Nigeria. You and I have talked about this issue many times before. The slaughter of Christians across that nation. This has been a dire problem for a long time. And for years now, we've talked about whether or not Nigeria should be redesignated a country of particular concern by the U.S. State Department. This was something that was done under the first Trump administration. The Biden administration removed Nigeria from that list. President Donald Trump has once again designated Nigeria a country of particular concern. Let's start there. For those who don't know what that means, what is that designation?
Sure. So there's a law from 1998 called the International Religious Freedom Act that requires the U.S. government to maintain a list of countries that commit or tolerate severe violations of religious freedom. And once a country is on that list, the U.S. government is required to address those violations of religious freedom, including by economic sanctions if necessary. Sadly, this list is quite political. There are many countries that deserve to be on it that aren't. And it doesn't really amount to very much in terms of enforcement. But one of the most egregious omissions from this list for years, as you mentioned, has been Nigeria. Nigeria is the deadliest place in the world to be a Christian. More Christians are killed in Nigeria for their faith every year than in the rest of the world combined. And yet somehow Nigeria is not on this list. As the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom said, this is unexplainable. So it's a long overdue step that the president has put it back on the list. And now we're looking to see what he'll do about it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just designating Nigeria. He put out a fairly strong worded statement about not ruling out military activity, U.S. military activity, boots on the ground, essentially saying that the U.S. was going to take action, pulling aid from Nigeria. What did you make when you saw the statement, not just the designation, the statement? What were you thinking?
I really wanted to know what the policy process was behind the statement. The statement is a statement. But there really needs to be some follow through. And right now, the Nigerian government is very worried about this. And that's a positive thing. I was just talking to my Nigerian colleague about an hour ago, and he said, people in Nigeria are very upset about this. The government is on its toes. They're looking for a way out. That's a positive situation. That's a situation in which there's a potential for good change. But there has to be some kind of follow through. And what my concern about the talk about military action is that the U.S. has already been involved in military action in Nigeria for a while. All the way back to 2014, the U.S. sent troops to help the Nigerian military fight Boko Haram and other jihadist groups. And that has never really stopped. The U.S. has standing military operations in a lot of West Africa. So when he talks about using military force, is he just going to bomb Boko Haram a few times? Because that is not going to solve the problem. And in fact, Boko Haram, this really in-your-face jihadist group that's always publishing horrifying videos and waves black flags everywhere, they are not the main problem these days. They make a lot of noise. But the real groups that are actually destroying Christian communities in Nigeria's Middle Belt region are Fulani militias that are conducting a slow-motion ethnic cleansing campaign, attacking Christian village after Christian village, killing whoever they find, driving people out, burning the village or occupying it. And slowly with time, we're seeing the map transform. And all these hundreds of old Christian villages are now gone and occupied by new people. That is happening because almost certainly there's some connivance with figures inside the Nigerian security state. And we're not going to bomb our way out of that problem. The U.S. has to really engage with the Nigerian government, make it clear that they have to put an end to this. And if they need our help putting an end to this, we can help. But the call is coming from inside the house. And the Nigerian government has to do something about it. That has to be the thrust of U.S. policy here if we're actually going to protect Christians in Nigeria.
Yeah, I mean, this is a situation, too, where nearly half of the country is Christian, right? And so you have, and in other places, you're talking about very small numbers of Christians. This is not the case there. And you just detailed what is happening, obviously. When you look at this situation, it is so horrifying. And yet there's this media narrative, too, that I feel like is popping up after Trump's statement. And we're seeing people say, well, there's no evidence that Christians are being killed more than Muslims. We don't see that any evidence for that. Christian Solidarity International and many other groups have been talking about this for a long time and talking about the Christian persecution aspect. How do you respond when you see the media saying, oh no, we don't know that Christians are being targeted?
I would say there's two cases here. There's Boko Haram and the jihadists who say, we target Christians. That's our goal. Our goal is to destroy Christianity in Nigeria and set up an Islamic State. That's one group. The other group is these Fulani militias who are very quiet, who don't make a lot of noise on the international scene, who are simply attacking. And in the Middle Belt region, in central Nigeria, places like Plateau State, Kaduna State, Benue State, it is almost exclusively Christian villages that are being attacked. There are other parts of Nigeria, like the Northwest, where there's a lot of insecurity. The government doesn't have a lot of presence on the ground. And yeah, there's a lot of violence between the people who live there, who are almost all Muslim to begin with. And that is a problem of insecurity and poverty and general absence of government structures. But in the Middle Belt, it's very clear what's happening. The Christian presence is being targeted. There is a program to get rid of them as a group. And so it's too simple to say, well, Muslims are being killed too. Of course they are. And it's a huge human tragedy. And everyone in Nigeria will be better off when this problem comes to an end. But it is senseless to deny that Christians are being targeted. They are.
Yeah. And okay, now Trump put out this statement. If you had Donald Trump in front of you right now, you talked about policy. What would your recommendation be for what the U.S. needs to do to help ease this? You gave a little bit of that, but if he was just like, what are the points I need to follow right now to you've looked at this more than almost anybody to fix this problem?
Yeah, I would say this needs sustained engagement from the U.S. So it would be good if there was someone like a Nigeria czar who reports directly to the president or perhaps to the Secretary of State, who is authorized to speak with Nigerian government officials and to make promises and to make threats, basically say, we need to see fewer attacks in this region. Tell us what you need to accomplish that. But if the attacks continue, there are going to be penalties. There are going to be aid cutoffs. There are going to be fewer invitations to security conferences. There are going to be real consequences for you and your people. So there isn't a silver bullet here. We need a sustained engagement from the Trump administration on this issue. We need to track how many attacks are happening over time, make sure that fewer are happening. And if the trend lines are going in the wrong direction, then yeah, there need to be consequences for the Nigerian government. Maybe I can add one other thing, because Senator Cruz has a bill in Congress right now called the Nigerian Religious Freedom Act, if I'm not mistaken. And that bill points to something very important, which is that in 12 states in Nigeria, Sharia law is the law of the land. And this is in flagrant contradiction to the Nigerian constitution itself, which demands secularism. But in these 12 states, Sharia courts operate. Christians and others are tried and put in prison for blasphemy against Islam. And it's in these states where you see a lot of violence against Christians. So there is almost a government stamp of approval for this Muslim supremacism that engenders violence against Christians. And that also really has to be addressed.
Well, Joel, I appreciate that you have tackled all of this today, helped us understand it better, and we'll continue to track with you on this because I think there are going to be more developments, obviously, on Nigeria. I think this is just the beginning of this conversation of what the U.S. is probably going to do moving forward. I can't imagine there won't be more, but we'll have to wait and see, and we'll continue tracking. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Billy.